I know exactly what you mean.
I bought a motorcycle when I was 15. I still got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Oh, yeah. We both ride quite a bit.
One of the bikes in there is it's been with us over 40 years.
Mike Wolfe made millions digging through America's attics, but he couldn't find what he needed most. A best friend dying in silence, a marriage collapsing behind locked doors, a violent crash on a dark Tennessee road. How did the star of American Pickers lose everything the cameras never filmed? And why did he let the world believe he was the villain when the truth was far more heartbreaking? Join us as we unravel the heartbreaking tragedy of Mike Wolfe from American Pickers. The junkyard education of a future star. Growing up as the second of 3 kids raised by a single mother, Mike Wolfe learned early that nothing came easy. Keeping the lights on was a daily battle, and money was rarely around when it mattered most. But that kind of struggle sharpened his eye. It taught him to spot value where others saw nothing, to find treasure in what most people would throw away. At 4 years old, he pulled a rusted bicycle from behind a neighbor's house and saw potential. He pumped air into the tires, wiped the grime from the frame, and made it his own. Then an older kid offered him $5 for it, and Mike took the deal without hesitation. In that single transaction, the entire architecture of his future was laid out before him. He had turned abandonment into currency, and the lesson stuck permanently. The family eventually relocated to Bettendorf, Iowa, inside the Quad Cities region along the Mississippi River. Here, Wolfe developed a strange habit that confused his classmates, but defined his future in ways no one could have predicted. He walked to school through the alleys rather than the sidewalks. He needed to see what people were throwing away. The open garages, the roadside piles, the things left behind when the front of the house was finished with them, these were his classrooms. It was in these back roads and junk piles that he met Frank Fritz, another kid with the same restless instinct running through his veins. They didn't know the word picker yet. They just knew they couldn't walk past a discarded object without wondering what story it held. For 40 years, they would walk that path together, never understanding where it would eventually lead them. But the bond they forged in those alleys carried a hidden cost, one that would take decades to come due. As a young man, Wolfe channeled his obsessive energy into competitive cycling, pushing his body as he did his curiosity. He raced at Cat 4 and Cat 3 levels from 1989 through 1998, learning patience and the willingness to grind. He opened 2 bicycle stores in Iowa, financing the venture by selling a 1934 Harley-Davidson to a collector in Bangkok. He was not yet a television personality. He was a man who understood old things had value, and the person who got there first got the prize. But the shops couldn't hold him for long. The road was calling, and Wolfe answered with a determination that bordered on obsession. He bought a cargo van and spent nearly 20 years driving the back roads of America, logging more than 60,000 miles in search of what he called rusty gold. He built a network of contacts that spanned the entire country. He developed an encyclopedic knowledge of antiques that no university could teach. And in 2000, he opened Antique Archaeology in LeClaire, Iowa, a modest storefront that would one day become a pilgrimage site for fans across the nation. For 5 long years, he pitched a television show based on his life of picking to anyone who would listen. Every network said no. They didn't understand the vision and couldn't see what Wolfe saw so clearly. But he kept knocking on doors, refusing to accept rejection as final, until the History Channel finally opened one. And when that door opened, everything changed. The empire that hid a deepening wound. The show premiered on January 18, 2010, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. 3.1 million viewers tuned in that first night, making it the highest-rated History Channel debut in years. By the end of the first season, the audience had swelled to over 5 million per episode, a number that beat American Idol in certain demographics. The concept was simple. Two guys drive around in a van buying old things. But the execution was something rarer and more valuable. It was genuine. Wolfe was the engine of the show, but not because he was performing a character written by producers. The cameras caught something real in him that couldn't be manufactured. When he walked into a barn sealed for 30 years and uncovered a vintage motorcycle under a dusty tarp, his expression wasn't calculated for ratings. It was the look of a man who had been searching his entire life and had finally found what he was chasing. That authenticity couldn't be faked across 27 seasons, and remarkably, it never was. Beside him was Frank Fritz, and their chemistry was unlike anything else on television at the time. This wasn't manufactured by casting directors in a Los Angeles office. It was the product of genuine friendship that stretched back to junior high school in Iowa. They knew each other's rhythms without speaking. They anticipated each other's moves before they happened. When they haggled over a price, the argument had the texture of 40 years of disagreement rather than scripted drama. The audience felt it was true because it actually was. Danielle Colby anchored the home base, managing the LeClaire shop while the men roamed the highways. Her presence gave the show structure and warmth that a pure road trip format would have lacked. The banter between the three of them was real because the relationships were real, built long before any television executive knew their names. They had existed long before any camera crew showed up, and the audience sensed the difference. But even dreams have shadows, and the shadows were growing longer with each passing season. The road that built the empire was also the road that kept Wolfe away from home. The miles that filled the bank account also emptied the spaces where the family was supposed to live. And while everyone watched the treasure hunts, nobody saw what was rotting beneath the surface. A highway of broken pacts. The public story of Frank Fritz's departure from American Pickers was simple and cruel in its construction. In July 2021, it was announced that he was leaving the show after 11 years. Fritz immediately told reporters the show had been tilted toward Wolfe 1,000%. He claimed they hadn't spoken in 2 years. He suggested Wolfe was replacing him with his younger brother Robbie. The media constructed a perfect narrative. The star had betrayed his lifelong friend for ego and glory. Fans took sides instantly, and the verdict was swift and merciless. Comment sections filled with venom directed at Wolfe. He posted a careful, warm Instagram message about missing Frank and wishing him well, hoping to calm the storm. Fritz publicly dismissed it as scripted and insincere. The villain narrative solidified into something unshakable. Wolfe absorbed it all without fighting back, without correcting the record. For 3 years, he let the world believe he was the traitor. What no one knew, what Wolfe kept locked away, was a secret that wasn't his to tell. During the pandemic, Fritz had injured his back severely, a debilitating condition requiring surgery. Doctors prescribed opioids for the pain, a common medical response with catastrophic potential. The medication, combined with the isolation of lockdown and the collapse of a romantic relationship, created a perfect storm. It was the exact formula for addiction to take hold fastest and hardest. Wolfe watched his childhood friend disappear into a chemical fog, the man he knew receding further each day. He did what a real friend does when nothing else works. He staged an intervention with the people who loved Fritz most, hoping love would prevail over chemistry. It didn't hold. When production resumed and the History Channel required negative drug tests as a condition of filming, Fritz could not provide them. The network made the decision, not Wolfe. But Wolfe chose to bear the blame publicly, rather than expose a man he had known since childhood. The cost of this silence was immense and lasting. Wolfe spent 3 years being vilified in a story he knew was completely wrong. He never corrected the record. He waited while Fritz gave interviews, painting him as the enemy. He stayed silent while his own reputation crumbled piece by piece. The truth was too devastating to weaponize, and Fritz was too fragile to defend himself from the consequences. The deathbed confession. The cameras missed. The stroke came in July 2022, and it was merciless in its precision and cruelty. Fritz was left paralyzed on his right side, stripped of his ability to make legal decisions. The boisterous picker who had once wrestled through barns and charmed farmers into selling their treasures couldn't sign his own name anymore. For 2 years, he drifted through hospitals and rehabilitation facilities, a shadow of the man America had loved. Wolfe didn't visit with cameras. He didn't issue statements to correct the public narrative, which still cast him as the villain. He waited, carrying the weight of a lie he had chosen to shoulder alone. The world still believed they were enemies. The comments sections are still filled with hate and accusations. And through it all, Wolfe held the real story close, knowing that someday the truth would have to come out. But not yet. Not while Fritz was still fighting. That day arrived in September 2024, and it came quietly, without fanfare. In a hospice room in Iowa, with no television crews and no audience, Mike Wolfe walked in and sat beside the man he had known since they were children, pulling junk from alleys. The feud, the public insults, the years of manufactured drama, none of it existed in that room. There was only the quiet hum of medical equipment and the shallow breathing of a dying man. Wolfe took Fritz's hand gently, the way you hold something precious that you know you're about to lose. He rubbed his chest. He leaned close and whispered the words he had been holding back for years. He wasn't mad at him. He loved him. And it was okay to let go now, to find his mother. The betrayal narrative that had dominated headlines dissolved into what it had always been, a fiction built on silence. When the final breath came, it was Mike Wolfe who reached over and closed his friend's eyes. He had protected Fritz in life by absorbing the villain narrative without complaint. Only after the obituaries were written did Wolfe quietly tell the real story. The split that dismantled a home. While Wolfe was busy protecting someone else's reputation on the road, his own home was disintegrating quietly in Tennessee. His marriage to Jody Fath had appeared solid from the outside. She managed his social media accounts and many of his business operations with skill. They had a daughter together named Charlie. They had built a life that looked like the reward for years of grinding work and endless miles. But the separation came in June 2020, right as the pandemic tightened its grip, and Fritz's addiction spiraled downward. The timing was brutal and compounding. Wolfe was losing his best friend to chemicals and his wife to something quieter, but equally final. Jody filed for divorce in November of that year, citing irreconcilable differences. The legal language was standard, but the reality was anything but ordinary. The settlement, finalized in 2021, required Wolfe to pay approximately $634,000 in alimony. Jody received ownership of their Nashville home and a property in North Carolina, along with a share of American Pickers' royalties through 2026. Wolfe retained multiple other properties, but the financial details were only the surface of deeper wounds. The same man who absorbed public blame for Fritz's departure also absorbed whatever private blame belonged to the collapse of his marriage. He never offered explanations to the press or the public. He never defended himself against whatever whispers circulated. The specifics were never made public because the resolution was negotiated rather than litigated in open court. But the emotional architecture was clear to anyone paying attention. Wolfe was losing everything that mattered, all while smiling for cameras and hunting through barns for the amusement of millions. Salvaging love in the wreckage. In 2021, as the divorce was finalized and the Fritz situation deteriorated, Wolfe began appearing publicly with Letitia Klein. She was a former model and motorcycle enthusiast whose interests aligned with his own in striking ways. She shared his passion for vintage vehicles and open roads. She fit into his aesthetic so seamlessly that the relationship looked less like a rebound and more like a logical continuation. They traveled together extensively. They shot a Harley-Davidson commercial showcasing their shared chemistry. They appeared at film premieres and public events. She seemed to be the co-pilot he had been searching for. But happiness, as Wolfe had learned repeatedly, is fragile cargo on a bumpy road. On the night of September 12, 2025, everything stopped in an instant of twisted metal. They were driving a vintage Porsche 356 through Columbia, Tennessee, a car Wolfe loved. A 76-year-old man named Lerone Heads pulled out from a side street in an SUV. Klein later said there was almost no time to react. The impact was devastating. Wolfe broke the steering wheel with his body, absorbing a force that could have ended him. He narrowly avoided being impaled by the steering column. He was released from the hospital the following day with a broken nose, stitches, heavy bruising across his face, and injuries to his knee and wrist. The physical pain was significant, but it was nothing compared to what had happened to the woman beside him. Letitia Klein's injuries were catastrophic and life-altering. Her jaw broke in 3 places, her ribs shattered, her sternum fractured, one of her lungs partially collapsed. She underwent multiple surgeries and spent weeks in the hospital before beginning what would be a months-long recovery. Her speech was limited for a long time. She had to prepare herself just to deliver a victim impact statement in court. Wolfe posted an update the next morning, saying that by the grace of God, they were both safe. He posted a photograph of the wreckage. He called it a second chance. The phrase carried weight it wouldn't have carried in a different year. He had already spent 2024 losing his oldest friend. He had already closed his Nashville antique archaeology store in April 2025, choosing to simplify his life. The crash was not just an accident. It was a reckoning with mortality, rebuilding a legacy from bones. In late 2025, while still recovering, Danielle Colby posted a video announcing that American Pickers was done. She described it as a financial crossroads and thanked fans for 15 years of watching. Headlines exploded across every entertainment outlet. Wolfe, who was in the middle of voiceover work for a new show, responded within days. The show wasn't finished. History Channel confirmed there was no truth to the cancellation reports. What Colby had spoken about was her financial reality. What Wolfe was building was something entirely different and new. His new series, History's Greatest Picks with Mike Wolfe, premiered in February 2026 and represented a genuine departure from the road trip format. Instead of negotiating in barns, Wolfe presented 8 historical artifacts per episode through studio segments. He brought in expert interviews and dramatic reenactments. He described it as shot totally differently. He described himself as excited and nervous. Season 27 of American Pickers was dedicated to Frank Fritz. Wolfe confirmed he has signed for additional seasons. The show is on hiatus, while its creator recovers from a car accident and from the grief of losing the person who was beside him for the first 11 years. The hiatus is the first in 15 years. Wolfe has called it a chance to breathe and heal. Now, Mike Wolfe is 61 years old, living in Tennessee, and co-parenting a teenage daughter. He operates Two Lanes Guest House in Columbia, where guests stay in a property furnished with picks. He maintains his clothing line and his endorsement relationship with Indian Motorcycles. The LeClaire store remains open, a monument to where it all began. He describes this chapter the way he has always described the things he finds in barns. The story isn't finished, the value is still there, and the person who recognizes it first gets to take it home. Was Mike right to protect Frank's secret for so long? Did success cost him the people he loved most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.